And welcome to the Retro Critical Podcast, episode 12, second episode here in October, and I'm happy that I got a second episode in. It's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode, but so much news to talk about that I just figured let's do a quick one here and then come back in November with a longer traditional 3-hour episode. So, of course, we've got to talk about the Nintendo NX or the Nintendo Switch. A really fascinating trailer video that they released that has some very clear positives, very clear negatives. So I really want to go into that. Here to talk about the release of my, I was going to say new book, but the release of my book, my first book, The Game Room, which, if you're listening to this, is now out pretty much everywhere as far as an ebook, and physical copies are available on Amazon. So I'm going to talk about what the book is actually about, some inspirations, and kind of the process of putting that together. Some really interesting gaming interviews that happened in between the last podcast and this one. Talking about an interview with a woman by the name of Amy Hennig of Naughty Dog and John Carmack of Oculus. They said some pretty trenchant things about the direction of the industry. And as far as I was going to say, I do not have a hardware update because for the first time in a long time, and probably pretty good from my tax accountant's perspective, I didn't buy any hardware. Didn't buy any new hardware. I stopped buying the home theater stuff. So no hardware update this month. But I will talk about, we'll do a This Month in Gaming. We skipped it last time. And look at October of 1999 in the gaming industry. So I think it's a focused episode, but it'll be fun. Here we go. I want to start off talking about my book. It is finally finished. It is going to be available in the next 2 to 3 days pretty much everywhere, at least online. It's not going to have too much of a brick-and-mortar presence, only because I kind of screwed up a technicality with ISBN numbers. It's a long story, but I wanted to come on today and kind of talk about really what the book is, how I was inspired to write it, and just give you some thoughts on the process of writing a book, which was rather new to me. So, what is this book? I released a trailer a couple weeks ago, kind of broadly introducing the themes, did a giveaway of, version 1.0 of the book, as it were, and yet I think it's worth taking some time to kind of go in to the inspiration and to some of the themes. So I wrote this over the summer. I had some time pretty much at the very end of July, beginning of August, and I did it as kind of a thought experiment almost. I didn't set out to really write a novel, but I was kind of left to my own devices and thought to myself, let me try to imagine a fairly plausible yet dystopian future for gaming. And, obviously you're going to say, well, isn't that what Ready Player One is? And I had read some of Ready Player One back when it came out. And I have to say that I sort of appreciate the idea that was supposed to be like a Hollywood post-apocalyptic sci-fi romp. And that's really not what I set out to do. I had been doing a lot of reading for some other projects not related to games about environmental catastrophes, geopolitical economics, things like that. And it's some pretty bleak stuff if you go into that kind of literature. So I guess I was thinking, where is my hobby of retro gaming going to go if a lot of these economic reports were to pan out? So one of the things that I had read about, and actually watched some pretty disturbing YouTube videos about, was fracking. And I'm not sure if we're all familiar with the term. Basically, fracking is a way to extract resources from rock formations and things like that, drill a hole into the ground, pump it with extremely poisonous, corrosive fluids, and you get your oil or natural gas out of the ground, and of course you just leave this polluted water to then seep into drinking water and things like that. So one of the articles that I had read was that if the U.S. went all in on this, particularly in a region of Pennsylvania, and it expands into West Virginia, Ohio, all the way down to Tennessee, Maryland, stuff like that, called the Marcellus Shale Foundation. If the United States were to go all in and frack the hell out of this place, we could actually have more oil and natural gas than Saudi Arabia, or at least more oil than Saudi Arabia. So I thought that was kind of a fascinating idea. Not that I necessarily think we should do it, but, if we did go all in, what would that society look like, particularly for the people living in and around it? And so as I looked at a couple maps of this, geological deposit, basically, I came upon the city of Wilkes-Barre, which is interesting because as a kid, I actually spent some time in Wilkes-Barre. I had some family there, and not too long ago, I was driving into Canada, and not into Canada. I was driving into upstate New York, and I actually passed this city. And so on the way back from my trip, I stopped there and just to see what it was like, and it was obviously totally different from what it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. There was some urban decay going on, and I thought, well, based on the map, if we were to pursue this oil and this natural gas, this city would kind of be on a borderland, so to speak, between the mining activities and just kind of regular American life. So that was interesting. So I sent the novel there, and the idea was to explore what is meaningful about retro gaming. Why do we do it? Why would we continue to do it? How do we see it as we get a little bit older? What are some of the holy grails that we pursue? And can we keep it up in the midst of economic, environmental, and political turmoil? So I started writing about this. I just kind of did essentially a demo chapter, and then I said, oh, this works. This is kind of interesting. So I kept going with it, and in about 2 or 3 weeks, I had essentially a very readable, decent length novel. And I think what I'm, most proud of, I can say, is that I think unlike Ready Player One, and really unlike anything else that's out there that I can think of, I think I've really done the best job that I can of really talking about why is collecting retro games so meaningful to us. And I didn't do it as kind of this celebratory exercise and just talking about how it's the most awesome hobby in the world. I try to create a character who was in love with the hobby, but also very conflicted about what it represented to him after he looked back on a decade or more of collecting, and kind of set it against sort of a romantic situation and a political situation and a game hunt in this region that I thought was, at least to me in the process of writing it, a fairly kind of compelling situation. And I think, like a lot of the stuff on my channel, I think if you encounter some of these ideas, they're going to be inherently controversial. And I think they'll generate a lot of discussion. So I've always said, I'm better in print than I am certainly making videos. And I think on this podcast, I've done a fair job of kind of communicating some of these more detailed, nuanced ideas than I was when I was just sort of a talking head with sunglasses and a hat on camera. And, I think it's a project that's very much aimed at this niche demographic of retro gamers. And I was happy to do it, without Patreon or anything else. Completely self-funded, and I'll go into what that means in a little bit. But the process of writing this book was pretty fascinating because, as someone who has done a fair bit of kind of technical and academic writing for my job, I haven't really written any kind of fiction. So I took the book to a couple of critique groups. There's some online, some here in the area, and to a friend who works in publishing. And of course, I wasn't sure what to do with it. So I went to this friend who works for a major publisher, and I said, you owe me one. I kind of proofread and consulted with you on your master's thesis because she wasn't a terribly strong writer. So I said, do me a favor, read this and tell me, you're working for, the big five, as it were. Is this something that you'd be interested in? Is this something that has a chance to sell? And so she read it and came back and said, well, I really like this romance. I really like this idea of this dystopian future, but you got too much video game stuff. No one's going to care about that. She said, take it back, get all the video game stuff out of there, just allude to it, and focus on the romance and the sci-fi aspect of it. So I was like, okay. I was fairly deflated. I, online, took it to one of these critique circles, and there was a guy who was very accommodating, a professional editor, and he kind of told me the same thing, is that, well, there's a lot of video game description, there's a lot of technology description, and kind of the average reader is not going to necessarily care about that. You need to sort of focus on the drama of the characterization. Now I'm really down. And in the process of taking it to a couple of other groups and finding some other people online and through these online critique groups, I found that when people who understood retro gaming, people who had grown up with video games, and who were interested in technology, when they read it, they had the completely opposite suggestion to me, because I was, of course, telling them, well, how do I reduce this, or how do I change the amount of description? And they said, why would you do that? This is awesome. This is, kind of a fascinating discussion of video games and technology, and, you shouldn't change it. You should, leave it as it is. One guy thought I was kind of trolling him as we sat down, and I said, look, in this chapter, I'm kind of going through this alternate American political history and what it meant for this character and why in this turmoil he still sort of stuck to collecting video games, and I think I could probably tweak it here or there. And he's like, no, why would you do that? Come on, you're just, you're screwing with me here. This is fine. So I had that reaction, of course, showed it to some local friends who were collectors, not really big readers, and again, they said, oh, it's pretty cool. I never thought that, surveillance or, the internet would turn out this way, and all the rest of it. So I figured, because of that sort of split, where the niche audience liked it, and kind of the broader audience was like, oh, why are you talking about video games? I didn't want to compromise the fact that this is a book about collecting video games and about retro gaming. So I figured, let me polish it as best I can, as a single person can, and get it out there, put it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the other ebook distributors, and see if it resonates with collectors, and see if it resonates with people who have been obsessively collecting for a long time. And I have to say, this is not this is a fairly serious book. This is not, like I said, it's not a celebration. It's, not for kids. It's extremely violent. It's very sexual in some parts. And it's actually funny because, I talk about going to these critique circles. So one of the people I was paired up with was an author of lesbian romance novels. And what you do is you take your manuscript or part of your manuscript and you swap it and you read it and you sit down and talk about it. So this woman, who was very nice, and I didn't have that much to offer to her as far as my knowledge of the genre in which she wrote, but she was, one of these people who had a lot of, quote unquote triggers. And it was funny to see what she was, really morally outraged by some of this. One of the characters smokes, and she was saying, the people have died of lung cancer. You can't do this. You can't include it. You got to write that stuff out. She, in one of the sort of early chapters of the book, the main character spends a ton of money to build a MAME cabinet, and he's, of course, torrented all of these ROMs, and he wants an arcade machine in his, game room. And so I said, well, he's torrented all these ROMs, and they got a special computer that the FCC couldn't detect, and, they hacked Windows and all the rest of it. And she said, are you teaching me how to build a bomb? What are you doing? So, of course, she had no idea what MAME was. So she thought that it was very sinister in certain parts, and I explained to her, I said, well, it's not really what you're thinking here. So that was kind of funny to go through that. The process of writing a book, I thought, and I'm not going to go through all the nitty-gritty detail. I'm just going to give some hints and advice. If you're considering ever doing this, I've made some mistakes in the process. One of the most critical mistake that I made was, since I didn't know where this was going to go, since I was just sort of writing and kind of experimenting in the early sort of parts of writing this, I just threw it in a Word document, and I expanded it, and I expanded it. I said, okay, well, this is a chapter, and this is a chapter. And eventually, the story was sort of flowing together, and all of a sudden, I've got 65,000 words, and I have no formatting. And I was just writing it in double space, Times New Roman, font 12. And when I went to actually convert it to an ebook and to a printable manuscript, I was totally screwed. So if you're going to do this, figure out your margins, your spacing, your trim, what the size, if you're doing a book, the size that you want the book to be, and the indentation and everything first, and then start writing. And please, this is another thing, break it up into, heading. Select the heading feature in Word so that you actually have the chapters broken up in code, rather than just saying, okay, this page is where 1 begins and this page is where 2 begins. I didn't do that, and I had an absolute formatting mess on my hands, especially when I tried to get into the ebook. So I had to use a different software for that, and the Word and this software didn't really play together, quote unquote, so well. And I just had all of these formatting issues where words were getting scrunched together, paragraphs were sort of being merged, or a big paragraph was being chopped up into 2. And I had all of these issues. So if you won one of the books in the giveaway, just update it through Kindle. And there were a couple of spacing and typographical issues, but mostly formatting issues that I corrected. And so I apologize for that, but it is what it is. The other thing I was pretty excited about was I got Hanzo to do the cover. And I don't know if you're familiar with Hanzo, but he was a guest on the Happy Console Gamer Show, very talented artist. And I said to him, look, he was accepting commissions on DeviantArt. And I contacted him and said, here's one of the main images, this kind of surveillance drone that comes to the game room and sort of spies on the main character. So could you draw that? And he came up with a great sort of anime-style drawing that I think really fits the themes of the book pretty well. The other mistake, so that wasn't a mistake, that was a very positive thing, because at least I have a cover that stands out. But you have to pay for that, and I was happy to do that. And speaking of paying for things, if you wanted to get a professional copy editor, not so much a story editor, but a copy editor, it was like $1,000 or $2,000 per 10,000 words, so it might have cost me between $6,000 and $12,000 to get this book edited by someone in the industry, which I didn't do. I just sort of did it myself over the course of I probably finished it in August, end of August, and then I've been sort of updating it and proofing it ever since to get it into a printable state. The other mistake that I made was that, I went through the kind of Kindle, Amazon CreateSpace system first, and what I should have done was gone through their competitor, Ingram Spark, or at least bought my own ISBN number, so that I could release it on both platforms and control the ISBN. I didn't do that, and so what it meant was that I would need to do a hardcover release through this other channel to get it into the physical stores. And since I don't know how much this is going to sell, and that's a very expensive process, I kind of cut myself out of the brick and mortar distribution channel without knowing it. So get your own ISBN number, or you can get them in blocks. They're going to cost you $200 to $300, and then distribute them to the kind of different versions of the book you're writing, or at least buy one through Ingram, which is a little bit cheaper. It's $100, and I believe you can use that on Amazon. And so you have both channels going at once. I wish I had known that. But, the takeaway of the book for me was, first of all, how much work it is to put a book together. Not just the creative aspect of writing it, but of all the people, who design the covers, who do the typesetting and the print layouts and stuff like that, and make the book look attractive. That was really the hardest part, and I probably spent more time between the editing and the layouts. And you're going to say, well, the layout, it just looks like a regular book. But when you have the level of formatting issues that I had, it took me a while to get it into the quote-unquote regular book look. So it's funny, you go into a Barnes & Noble, or you go into a bookstore, and you see the kind of bargain bin books, and so many people pour so much of themselves into it, particularly the authors. And it's sad to think that, a little part of your soul is selling in Barnes & Noble for, $2.99 at Christmas. But, that is the industry. So the book is $4.99. For an ebook, it's $9.99 if you want the physical book. And like I said, depending on when you're listening to this, it'll already be out, or it'll be a couple days away from being out. And in the physical form, it's been out for a while now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And if you look on Amazon and you look at the book preview, at least now it's the ebook preview, it looks kind of, I don't know, again, the formatting is not great. When you actually download it, though, it looks normal, like a regular ebook, so don't be put off by that. I didn't understand why this was. I was told by some people who, some other authors and people in Amazon, well, Amazon doesn't do a good job of compiling the preview. They do a good job of compiling the actual book. So be that as it may, I'll be very interested to hear people's feedback on this. I feel like one of the things that is a strength of the book, at least from my perspective, is that, I've been on YouTube now for coming up on 4 years, about 3.5 years at this point. And I think in a lot of the blogs and the commentaries that I've done, I've brought up interesting kind of tidbits of ideas about the hobby. And what this book does is it really fleshes a lot of that stuff out and combines it into a narrative that I think speaks very much to the cultural moment of the United States, but also, it does justice to the hobby in a way, again, that's serious. And so if you thought, this podcast segment or this video was interesting, chances are a lot of those ideas have been fleshed out in the book, depending on what you think is interesting. But, all of the kind of the major ideas and the major theories, really, that I've brought it into the discussion about gaming is, all of this stuff is in the book, and I think more engaging detail than it has been on the video. So, it's very interesting to see. Like I said, it could be very controversial. It could be somewhat disturbing. Again, certainly the kind of graphic nature of the book might disturb people. But I think it is going to be rewarding just to engage with the ideas about what it means to be a collector. So again, book is available, and we'll see what people think. Well, the big news over the period between the last podcast and this podcast is obviously the revelation about the Nintendo NX, or as it's now called, the Nintendo Switch. And I was really surprised by that. I guess it was about a 3-minute, 40-second trailer or demo, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to start off positive and then go into some things that concern me. I think the positive that you take away from this is Nintendo is realizing that the console business is probably dying down, at least in its traditional form. I think with the release of the PlayStation Pro, with VR, with Project Scorpion, this idea of kind of constant yearly refreshes that we might be heading to, or at least mid-cycle refreshes. The idea of dedicated long-term hardware is just not going to be there anymore. It's either going to become kind of a commodity/service like a cell phone, or, and we've all, I guess, kind of thought about this for the past couple of years, it'll just become obsolete. The gaming will move to mobile devices, and you will, in some case, through some sort of a set-top box or dongle, you'll be able to project them on your television. So I think it's very smart that Nintendo tried to create a system to accommodate that, and I think even more relevant to their business in particular, to create a system that will unify their TV-based platform with the mobile platform. And obviously the 3DS, though it hasn't been selling well of late, is an incredibly successful product. So why not merge the two and kind of preserve the handheld business, extend and expand the console business, and prepare yourself for a future in which your bread and butter hardware product may no longer be viable in the market. So I think a lot of that is, well done. And obviously with Nintendo's wealth of first-party excellent games that they produce, they're going to really ensure themselves a fair degree of success in the marketplace. So that's the positive, and I would like to see, obviously, I don't want to see Nintendo go away. I don't really want to see them become just a software developer, so I think the overall concept was smart. But now to the negative. I think there are a number of really kind of surprising design choices and very kind of suspect information that came up in that trailer. The first one is just the overall design. I mean, we knew this was coming. If you looked at the stuff that was on Eurogamer, I talked about it here a couple episodes ago. You knew that it was going to be, obviously, some kind of a tablet device with detachable controllers that you would sort of plug into a base station. I think, very kind of simply, the base station is ugly. This seems to be a very, I don't know, it kind of looks like a toaster. And as a number of people have pointed out, the screen is not completely contained within this docking station, so it's going to be exposed to dust or scratches. It just looks like a poor fit. And I mean, almost I say a toaster oven, but like one of those flat HD TV antennas from about 2008 is the styling here. Now, I think of more concern, kind of beyond that, is the fit and finish. Now, of course, Nintendo products are very, very robust, but I think anytime you have moving parts, that you're going to constantly be attaching and detaching, you're going to, I think, wear them down over time. I mean, if you look at things like the 3DS screens, I mean, yeah, they're pretty robust, but if you're constantly opening and closing them, 3, 4, or 5 years down the road, they get loose. And something like this, I really hope that they have designed this well, because obviously if you're, in the demographic that listens to this show, 20, 30, 40, or older, you're going to treat it okay. But, with kids, in their excitement and their haste to kind of use the thing, are they going to break it off? So, very curious design. And then there's the idea of messaging. And I think they didn't learn all that much from the disaster that was the Wii U, because I think there's going to be a fair amount of confusion. I mean, we saw the set-top box. We saw the guy in the beginning playing with what looked to be the two ends of the tablet that were stuck together around this centerpiece, some sort of battery wireless communications console. But then they would always cut to what looked like a new version of the Pro controller. So, I mean, I had to rewind and say, wait a minute, is there two separate controllers? How does this work? And then all of the usage scenarios that they presented, I don't think are realistic, except for the first one where the guy's sitting on the couch. I mean, this idea that you're going to take the handhelds into an airport and sit down, and a beautiful woman will just happen to have the same thing. Obviously, that's nonsensical. And then you're going to sit in the plane, prop it up on a stand, detach the controllers, and play a two-handed game of what looked like Skyrim. I mean, totally unrealistic. I mean, as someone who travels, fairly frequent, well, not fairly frequently, but frequently enough to be annoyed by travel, I always want to pare down. I mean, I've stopped taking the traditional laptop. I have that Microsoft Surface thing that I've been talking about, and even that gets a little bit bulky. And your cell phone, I don't know that when you're crammed into the human cargo economy class or premium economy class, you're going to want another device, particularly one that requires a fair degree of space around you. Then what else do they have? This kind of insane active lifestyle thing where you're going to take it to a go-kart track and then break the things off and sit around and play Mario Kart, or take it to a basketball, series of basketball courts that are, under a bridge and looked absolutely pristine, and you're going to stop playing basketball to then play NBA 2K17 with these little controllers, and the controllers really look small. I don't know how. I mean, obviously Mario Kart could be played with that, but I don't know how you're going to do a complex game like the NBA 2K series. I mean, horribly unrealistic. I've never, and of course I'm not an athletic person, but a few times, I'll go out and I'll play tennis or bike ride with some people, although that's very infrequent, but I have done it in the past. Obviously, we're not taking a break to go on the digital device. And then kind of the hipster on the roof party aesthetic. I mean, I just don't see their customers really needing a device like this or using a device like this in the way that they presented. And of course, to be fair, they showed you all the different usage scenarios, and that was fine. But I just think most of their customer base wants to either sit on the couch and play or have a device. I think a lot of people, quite frankly, and I've talked to some people and they agree with me. I'm starting to sound like Trump, people are saying here, but just from following some people online, I think a lot of us, when we play the 3DS, actually play it in bed, or we play it in another room. Someone's watching the TV and you just lay in the guest room and play the 3DS. I've never taken the 3DS on a trip. I shouldn't say that. I took it once. A girlfriend and I went on a trip, and there was a day where she was doing something, so I did that once. But to me, this is not a travel device, so I don't know that a lot of us have a need to, pause the game, take the thing out, stick it in our pocket, and resume it later. It's a cool idea, but I think it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, much in the same way that the Nintendo Wii, or the Wii U thing, where they were like, oh, well, you shut the thing off and you can kind of play if you're in range. Some people may have used that if they have a big family and one television, but I imagine the reality of the situation is if you're a couple, and you're together, I mean, you're probably going to watch the same thing on television. I don't know. I mean, that's how it works out for me. Or if I really don't want to watch, what the other person is watching, I'll just go in the other room, or I will just read there, and we'll be in the same room but not paying attention to the same thing. So I can't see, especially targeting 20, 30 somethings, which it seemed like it did in that ad. I just don't know that there's a need or a time to actually carry the game with you. And the other question is, and actually this is connected to the Wii U, what is the quality of this tablet-like device? The crushing thing about the Wii U, I think, is that the screen was so bad compared to your HD TV that it was kind of like, why do I want to look down at this? Maybe I'll do some inventory management, but I want to play on my television. And even if the screen is great, the rate at which the screens on mobile devices get better and better, I think this could run into the problem of being obsolete pretty soon. So unless they really have a knockout AMOLED screen with the most amazing, bright, and vibrant colors, I think it's going to be an uphill battle. Then you look at the software. Obviously, I can't wait to play The Legend of Zelda, the Mario game. I'm always up for another Mario 3D World / Mario 64 type game. Skyrim and Mario Kart, I mean, I've played them already. I hate the fact that they're advertising with remakes. I think this is a really bad trend that we're getting to, where, just, okay, every 5 years we're going to remake the same game. I love Skyrim. I've put tons of hours into it on the PC, and whether it's this new one that's coming out for the PlayStation 4 or this one for the the Wii U, for the Switch, not playing it again. I mean, the only way I could be tempted is if it went on sale and my progress would carry over. Now, I realize why they did that. They wanted to show that, oh, this is powerful, but, I mean, Skyrim's a, 5-year-old game at this point, so I don't know how much real power that is. It's a Tegra chip, and it's going to be more along the lines of a mobile device, I would imagine. And then the other thing that I thought was kind of a nice idea, but it's been tried before and it's failed before, was all of these other developers who have signed on. I mean, if you remember, a ton of developers signed on for the Wii U, and the initial wave of launch games had things like Madden and Call of Duty, but when the platform didn't take off, these guys went away. And of course the question becomes, they've signed on for the platform, but have they signed on to the platform to kind of make mobile games and 3DS games, or full-fledged, actual AAA titles? So I'm not seeing a lot that will, I think, put Nintendo kind of on the mainstream here. I'm not seeing enough kind of innovation where you can say, oh, this is a nice second course that they're charting for the console space. Now, again, they're going to survive on the quality of their software, but I think the dual screen quasi, quote-unquote innovative play mechanic, it just hasn't worked out. I mean, the asynchronous multiplayer, whatever they want to call it, that didn't work out with the Wii U. I mean, they had some fun ideas with Nintendo Land and all of that, but even with the 3DS, I often feel like, I don't want to draw on the screen, I don't want to blow into the mic, I just want to play a game. And I think if they had come out and said, look, we've got this great little set-top box thing, we've got the little, whatever you want to call them, 3DS cartridges, we've gone back to cartridges, and you can play them on your television, and if you want, you can buy this great touchscreen controller that will kind of double as a 3DS as an upsell. I think that would have been a lot more convincing than this kind of Transformer-esque thing that we're going to have in our living rooms, and that seemed like it couldn't really rest flat. I mean, this had to stand up. Not a problem for me, but I could imagine it will be a problem for some people. So what I had hoped for, honestly, because I assume they weren't going to move away from the dual screen thing, but I think a better course to chart would have been to say, look, here's the home console, NX or Switch, and what you can do is we're going to sell you this these little controller things in a slot where you can put your smartphone in, and the extension into the mobile space is going to be accomplished actually, over Android and iOS. So Nintendo will actually become, and again, I don't like this, but I think it would have been the smarter business move. We're going to become a major player in mobile gaming, and we've got our Pokemon Go, we've got I can't remember the thing, Miitomo. We tested the waters with that, and now we're going to, through some service, extend your gameplay from the home console to your phone using this specialized controller dock, and we're going to release our 3DS games online, and you can still have the touchscreen, and you can still buy them with a cartridge. It'll be kind of like I don't know what you want to call it, a little authenticator chip, cartridge thing. Plug it into this portable controller dock, and the game will download to your phone, or you'll have access to it in the cloud, or maybe there's some memory. So you're harnessing the technology the players already have, and better technology. I mean, I would imagine that the latest phones, well, not the Samsung phones that explode, but whatever the latest phones are going to have much better capabilities, much better screen than this Nintendo device. And then you could sell kind of a cheap Nintendo tablet, the kids that might not have a smartphone, or if you want a slightly cheaper option. But as it stands now, I don't know. I feel like I was the target audience for this, but I'm not really excited by it. It serves no particular need that I have, but I will admit, I will buy this thing, and it's coming out in March, so tax time, and you get a little refund around that time, so certainly it's something that I will pick up. And I don't know what the price is going to be, but I think it needs to be about $3.99. I unless they reveal something else about it, something magical that I don't know. But I mean, if it's a mobile device with a TV interface running on a NVIDIA Tegra chip, I can't see them charging more than $3.99. But yeah, I will pick it up. I guess the thing I was surprised by, at least, and again, we're going off of a 3-minute sort of intro trailer, no mention of VR. And I as someone who doesn't, who's very critical of the VR experiences that I have had, if they had come up with kind of like a cheap VR gimmick that they could, if that was the user interface gimmick that they had with this, that was otherwise kind of a normal console, I would have gone for that. And of course, that's something that they can add over time. So I think it's strange. I think it's a great concept in a perplexing kind of package. I will certainly look for more info about it. But let me know what you guys think, and leave some comments and some questions to the show, and we'll see how this plays out. the other thing about the Nintendo Switch presentation that really struck me was, again, the kind of presentation of the people in this advertisement. And it got me to thinking, video game advertisements, when they have featured people, have been abysmally silly. And it goes all the way back to, I don't know if you remember the initial or one of the initial NES commercials, and then certainly the print advertisements where you had that family that looked like they were in almost an orgasmic state of pleasure, where the mother and the father are like leaning over the kids, and the kids are staring into the screen, and the reaction is so disproportionate to what they're doing, almost as if, they just told these actors to smile insanely and look at the screen. You've seen this in countless ads where you'd see the people, sitting on the couch playing with the controller in a way that, of course, as a gamer, you've never seen. Even the Sega Genesis ads, which were probably the best of video game ads with actual people in it, simply because it went for that 90s attitude, and I think both created and also captured it in an amusing way. Nonetheless, silly, this idea that, the kids of the time were just adrenaline freaks, and the Genesis would sort of blow their faces off. You remember the Sega CD one, where the guy's on the couch and his hair is blown back by this incredible game that he was playing. And, of course, if you played Sword Shark on the Sega CD, you were anything but blown away. And then you take it to really crazy misreadings of the consumer base. And my favorite is, and I don't know if you guys out there remember this, but I would say maybe in 2006 to 2008, Sony ran an ad campaign for the PlayStation Portable with a trash-talking black kid from the streets named Marcus. And Marcus would come on in the most racially stereotypical way possible and trash-talk you and challenge you to get to his level of play on the PSP. And you're looking at this and you're like, what the hell are they thinking? What are they, what are they doing? This is absolutely insulting. That they, that they would do this to this kid and have the stereotypical portrayal, but also it made you wonder, what do they think of the consumer base? I mean, we're going to somehow feel like, oh, well, now if Marcus is telling me I'm a pussy, I've got to go get the PSP and play Spyro the Dragon. It's absurd. I mean, they also tried with that marketing guy for Sony back in the PS3 era. They tried the kind of traditional address to the audience now, which is the ironic, humorous in-joke, where if we're all part of the in-joke, we're all the customers, and so, we're all in on it. We all have the PS3, and if we don't, and we're in on it, we better buy one. So, that also, in its own way, didn't work, but the Switch thing was, I mean, when you think about it, and I alluded to this in the previous segment, it's actually absurd to think that this is what 20 to 35-something players do. And I think it's important and very telling that Nintendo has gone after that demographic consciously in this ad, because I think for them, I mean, I think that's, you don't want to be the kid's toy. You want to be that secondary system for the kind of connected adult player with some disposable income. So I thought that was fine. And I thought that the presentation, I mean, Nintendo was very conscious in making sure we knew what the functionality of this device was throughout that 3 minutes. But the people and the circumstances in which this game, in which the Switch would be played is so horrendously unrealistic to how gamers consume the content that it's almost laughable. I mean, I consider myself to be a person who is a passionate video game player, and yet I have, as I mentioned, I've never, challenged people in airports, and I've never felt the need to have this whole complex system on a flight. Those of us who do travel for business, it's a constant struggle between being comfortable, getting some sleep, and getting some work done on the plane. This idea that we'll somehow play basketball and then, we'll have our little hipster basketball game and stop and have a multiplayer session, or, we're out on the roof. I mean, what is the point of all of this? They're insulting, but they're also random, these kind of random images. Why did they choose this particular representation of the player versus anything else? And that's the problem that so many of these ads have. When you put people in video game ads, you struggle with this idea of representing the gamer. And I think the reality is, if you've ever looked at someone playing a game, there's kind of a quiet, obsessive intensity about them, and that's not something that sells. I mean, gosh, when my buddy comes over and we play a game of Madden, if you looked at our faces, you would realize that, we're not incredibly photogenic. But if you look at the expression, it's not one of tremendous shock and joy over what we're doing. It's a sort of a focused, almost angry look. And I've seen that on a lot of players. So I think the best video game ads have traditionally been the ones that just show the gameplay, that talk about the system, that feature the system, show the games, and keep people minimal or completely absent. Those are the ones as a kid that always excited me. I mean, think back to the Mortal Kombat or Super Street Fighter 2 ads, where you just saw the gameplay with the quick cuts, and it got you excited about the game. The cinematic trailer that we see for a lot of games, to me, is also kind of ineffective in the sense that I don't play video games because I want to experience a Hollywood movie, so those never spoke to me. Probably the only one that did was the Final Fantasy VII campaign, which kind of mixed the idea of a Hollywood trailer with some actual gameplay, and that was incredibly big. I mean, to see that during an NFL game was impressive. But, yeah, I'm sure I'm missing some very, very sad or silly or insulting depictions of players in video game ads, so let me know. I know there's a whole thing of, like, arcade operator manuals where you've got, the half-naked woman, humping a Metal Slug cabinet or something like that. So there's that aspect to it. But, yeah, let me know what are some of your laughably bad favorite video game ads. I come on here and I complain and critique, and I enjoy doing it, but I find it particularly rewarding when some of the criticisms that I make on this very, very small platform are, made on a slightly larger stage, or in this case, a significantly larger stage. And that's what happened as I was reading the news this month. I first came across a pretty fascinating interview with a woman named... what is her name here? Amy Hennig, and she was the director of the Uncharted series and worked, obviously, for Naughty Dog and some other companies. And she was had a very kind of self-reflexive, or reflective, I should say, moment in this interview. And she says that, she worked at Naughty Dog for 10 years, and she never worked less than 80 hours a week. And she goes on to say a little bit later in the interview that she was questioning, whether AAA games were worth it. Not only worth it for her and what she had to sacrifice in terms of her family life, but the games themselves don't seem, in the end, to be worth all of the effort that is put into making them. And I'll take it a step further and say, I think a lot of players frequently get these products and people have literally slaved over them, and they're not, in many cases, they're not as polished as we want them to be. We're not as thrilled with them as we hoped that we were. They don't live up to the hype, and so she says, this is AAA development is becoming an unwinnable arms race. And if it's not worth it in terms of the sacrifice of the people making the game, again, both from a personal and a professional perspective, if they're not happy with the end product, or as happy with it as they would like to be, and if we as gamers are getting these games and we're not as thrilled as we hoped that we would be, what are we doing? What are we doing as players? And I've found this, and I think, I think there's something inherently horrible about this AAA model. And of course, a lot of this is driven by the financial cycles of these companies. They need X amount of games out at a certain time. So even games with kernels of a good idea wind up being technically flawed, or the idea is not explored enough or in enough detail. And I think, to the credit of a lot of American or Western developers, they've mastered the atmosphere of these particular worlds that they're creating. But that's, they can always be very empty. There's so much that goes in, I think, to making a great game, and when you're working under that kind of time pressure, and when you're working to fill a kind of checkbox list of expectations, I think both sides burn out, and I think we're starting to enter a time in gaming where the gamer and the game developers are burning out on this model. So I've advocated many times for, let's return to just simpler game design. Let's return to the kind of 32-bit up to PlayStation 2, not necessarily graphically, because we can do better than that, but just the game design aesthetics. We don't need a friggin' Hollywood movie. We don't, actually, I think, maybe I'm in the minority, but I don't want a Hollywood movie with expensive set pieces and celebrity voice actors. I just want a game that I could sit down and enjoy. I don't need layers of complexity. I don't need, micro economies that throw me in a position of inequality to other players and force me to kind of waste my time or waste my money sort of making myself competitive. I think if we just got rid of all of that and gone back to releasing a good quality physical or digital product that will give you 10 to 20 hours of fun, mechanically sound gameplay, that would be fine. So it was very interesting to hear that. And then about a couple weeks later, this guy, John Carmack, who's the CTO of Oculus, was at a developers conference, and he kind of echoed some of the things that I had said about it when I reviewed the Oculus Rift. He says here, and I have a quote on this, he says, "We're coasting on novelty and the initial wonder of being something people have never seen before. But we need to start judging ourselves, not on a curve, but in an absolute sense. Can you do something in VR that has the same value or more value than what these other non-VR things have done?" And I think that's a critical point, because I have not seen, at least in my time, or I didn't see in my time with the Oculus, anything that was giving me anything more than what I had on my computer. In a lot of cases, it was less than that. It was either the graphical fidelity was lower, it was just kind of irritating, and you heard the whole spiel. It was irritating to get the thing on. I had motion sickness, and with one or two exceptions, there were no games that drew me in. And I think we're still, even with what I've seen of the PlayStation VR, we're still in this novelty phase. And if you go on to the website, and I wrote up a little review of this that kind of summarized everything I've said on the podcast. By the way, that is now Will Cladley at WordPress.com, not the Game Escape at WordPress.com. Will Cladley at .wordpress.com. And I said, the key setting that you need to adjust in VR is actually your own expectations. I think we're still at a stage where people really want to like it, where they look into that headset and they see the future. But I think on closer inspection, particularly with what else is available on the PC, you may look into that headset and see that you've wasted a lot of money. So I think it's very positive, that he would bring that out. Now, of course, if you've been to these kind of business conferences, you have some CFO or CEO coming up on the stage and telling you that you're fundamentally deficient in what you're doing, and we need to be disruptors and all that bullshit. But I think in this case, this is a fair point. Now, he brought up something else that I didn't necessarily notice, when I had the Rift. But he talks about, he really went on about load times, and apparently VR load times are atrocious. And he says that they need to reduce them to 29 seconds or less, and they're having a hard time doing that. He says these load times, he goes, quote, "That's acceptable if you're going to sit down and play for an hour, but in VR, initial startup time is really poisonous." An analogy I like to say is, imagine if your phone took 30 seconds to unlock every time you wanted to use it, you'd use it a lot less. Again, another fair point. Like I said, I didn't necessarily notice that. No, I guess if I think about it, maybe Project Cars took a little bit to load, but that's a problem if that's true. So, I get the sense that this first generation VR isn't going much further than it's gone. I'm not seeing anything new or different coming down the pike. Again, I'm not following it as my profession, but I think this first generation VR is going to be very much the experience, the add-on. Not sure if we're going to get too many full-fledged games. That's a shame because, like I said, Project Cars, Dirt Rally, and Eclipse. I can't think of the space exploration game that I talked about it here on the podcast. You can look it up. And now I had a blast playing it. It was actually the best game. But it obviously didn't leave enough of an impression on me to remember the name. Anyway, those were full-fledged games. And, everyone's talking about the Batman experience, the Star Wars experience. You're asking a lot of people to buy, easily a $1,500 computer, a $600 to $800 headset and controllers, only to play these kind of, lackluster add-on types of content that kind of get boring after the first few go-arounds. So, yeah, I think two very interesting interviews if you go and read them, two important points about the industry, and let's hope that in each instance things turn around. So we're going to do this month in gaming, and I feel kind of bad. I didn't do a this month in gaming for September, which is unfortunate because September is one of my fondest gaming months because I have a birthday in September, and so I always actually got new games, and it was kind of the perfect cap to the summer. But I forgot, so we're going to have to leave that for next year. And then looking at October, I always saw October as that transitional period. You know, you didn't have the pre-holiday hype just yet. You didn't have those November releases coming out. And, you know, it just didn't seem like there was a ton of stuff coming out in October. So I focused in on October 99 because of one game. And this game didn't come out in October, but I bought it in October. And just thinking about it brought me back to what I think October 99, fall of 99 was really an amazing time in gaming. So the game that sort of brought me back was a strange one. It was NFL Game Day 99 with that Broncos running back, whose name escapes me, but I think he was one of the co-MVPs of one of the Super Bowls. Anyway, I got this game in October, or close to October, maybe at the end of September. And of course, you have to remember that back in this time, you had 3 competing football games, and Madden wasn't the best. You had the Game Day series, Madden, and the 2K series. And of course, I didn't have a Dreamcast, so the 2K series was not going to be an option for me. But this was a really good game. It was you know, up to that point, the best football game that I had played. You know, 3D football game, and it was a strange one. It you know, played well. It had great graphics, but it had these weird cheerleader cutscenes where, you know, it would load, and you'd see these cheerleaders like kind of mocking you for holding, you know, they have the controller in their hand, or like they're pointing at you and giggling like, hey, you're a loser, you know, playing this, you know, PlayStation football game, and we're going to go sleep with the real football players. It was a very kind of strange aesthetic. Anyway, I had a blast with this game, and I remember it because my best friend, you know, he had moved, I guess he had moved earlier than 99, but moved to Florida. I remember it was so funny. It was like no one knew he was moving. And then, you know, one day he was in high school, one day he wasn't. He was gone. And so I had to keep in touch with him over the phone and whatever, but he would always come back to visit, and we played the hell out of this game. I mean, this game was amazing, and it just, you know, he came in October for some reason. I don't know, and we played this game forever. You know, it seemed like during that trip, and I eventually lent it to him, probably not in October of 99 when, you know, I had just gotten it a couple weeks ago, but it was funny. He had moved. He moved back to the tri-state area, and I was visiting him. He's like, "Oh, hey, here you go. Thanks for lending this to me." So, you know, I got that game back after having lost so many others. So I spent a lot of time with that. But, you know, God, if you look at what was coming out that fall, it was incredible. I mean, obviously you had the release of the Dreamcast, so you had all the good, you know, release games. Obviously, if you look at October, you've got Sonic Adventure, and again, that's not the best game, but you know, it was fun and it was unique. So I was amazed by it. Going back, not the biggest fan. Pokemon Yellow Special Pikachu Edition came out, and I had only discovered that via emulation much later. That in itself, I think, is one of the better early Pokemon games. You've got Jet Force Gemini, which I had played at a friend's house and wasn't too thrilled about it. I played it fairly recently on that Xbox One Rare Collection. Still wasn't a huge fan, but, you know, it was an impressive-looking game at the time. You had Spyro 2, and I think people forget that Spyro actually was kind of a big deal for its quasi-cel-shaded style. And then as I go around, like, looking at what other people were playing, and I'm going to kind of go back. Not a lot of. By the way, the Sonic Adventure release was a little bit earlier. That was a launch game. I'm seeing October here, but I guess that's for maybe the European one. But anyway, just look at all the games that came out. I mean, you had Suikoden 2. God, I wish I had bought that game. But I didn't. Soul Calibur. I mean, just those initial Dreamcast games. Let's see. What else came out? There was one. I mean, Madden NFL 2000. I actually had that one. But I gotta look at the. Obviously, that September 9th, 99 was huge. I could have sworn there was another game that came out, the Marvel vs. Capcom. I'm not seeing that here, but anyway, a friend of mine, I think I mentioned this on the show before. His father was like the VP of some like local cable company, before they became, before they were all bought up by the evil empire known as Comcast. We go over his house because he got all the pay-per-views, so we could watch all the wrestling pay-per-views for free. So we would go over his house, and he had the Dreamcast, right when it was released. I remember playing all those games, and so we would go over for Fall Brawl. I guess that was like the end of September, and I don't know what WWE had at that point, but for some reason I remember doing all the WCW events. I don't know if this is quite in the Goldberg streak era, but we went back then in October for Halloween Havoc and War Games in November, and just playing that Dreamcast was a pretty amazing experience. And then thinking back to, that was not my last year of high school. Was it my last year of high? No, that was my October of '99 was my last year of high school. So obviously you're over the stress of the junior year, and you're kind of coasting. And I just remember, having those video game conversations. I guess no, I was still applying to colleges at that point, but whatever. I think, now kids have got the cell phones, and, when we were in high school and you had lunch, I mean, that was a time, if you were of the persuasion that I was, you'd sit with the guys and you'd talk about video games. Maybe one of you would have a magazine, and since no girls were talking to us, whatever, we would just pull out the magazine and look at all this stuff, and just that honest conversation of like discovery. Is like, well, what did you do last night in that particular game? Or I have really, and this was not October of '99, but that when Final Fantasy VII came out, I mean, it was unbelievable, like the discussions that you'd have at lunch. And I think for a lot of people now, October of '99, it was all about the Dreamcast. And, how far did you get in Sonic Adventure? Or, what were you doing in Soul Calibur? Really, the 2K football game, again, was big too, and that's where I got sort of jealous. I was like, well, I got my game day. Oh, fuck that. The Dreamcast is better. And it was better. And I realized, I miss those conversations. And I don't know what about it, when I was staring at that football game on my shelf, just sort of took me back to that era in high school where, I was just surrounded by, the cultural products that I loved at the time and still love now. You have the video games, pro wrestling, the Stone Cold Steve Austin era, the kind of rise of the internet, the early, rise of online gaming, computer gaming, also really big. And then, of course, you had your license and your first car. And, I just remember just a lot of hanging out. And, the world was a lot simpler. It was before 9/11 and all the rest of it. So, it just felt like that was my last, gaming, I guess, fall of my youth, really. I mean, it's funny because in college, I I mean, my roommate had got a PlayStation 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3, and, he left it there, and he would go home, and I would, friggin' binge on it. But, I didn't have my games there, and I've talked about this, I kind of got away from gaming, and, then I went to Europe, and, did went to college there, and, I talked about this in my interview with Johnny Millennium, and he experienced the same thing in Great Britain. I was in Germany. There was no gaming. I mean, it was like you couldn't talk to anyone about it at all. And, I didn't play a game for a year and a half or 2 years or whatever it was. So this was really the last hurrah for me. Even though, as I read through this, the list of games in October specifically weren't that great. It's still just as a fond memory of what, I didn't realize it at the time. Of course, when you're in the midst of being young, you don't realize these things. And it didn't really hit me until I started to think about this segment, but it was really one of the last great gaming times of my youth. And there you have it, episode 12 of the Retro Critical Podcast. I just wanted to, before I sign off, talk a little bit more about Forza Horizon 3. And I wouldn't say negative on it, but I was kind of lukewarm in the last podcast. And it's really been the only game that I've been playing, so, not really worth its own segment, but now I'm farther into it. I've earned a lot of credits. The game has opened up a little bit. And so it's better than what I described. It's also been patched on the PC. So now it's playable. It was, bordering on not being playable the first time, and it actually, I think, got a little bit worse after I recorded that segment because I was opening up new areas, and the slowdown and the frame rate dips and the flickering was just getting out of control. But they've fixed all of that, so I would say now it's an enjoyable experience. I actually, because I guess, where did I buy this? I can't remember. No, I bought this on the PC. But I think somehow it saw that I not only had the Forza Apex game save on the PC, but also the Horizon 2, Forza 5 and 6 on the Xbox. So I actually started with, bonus cars. And I didn't feel the need to upgrade them that much. I also didn't feel the need to go out and purchase a lot of stuff right away. So I slowly racked up credits and did the barn finds and unlocked the different areas. And now I'm to the point where I can actually shop, and so I've had some fun, like taking out a whole bunch, buying a whole bunch of different cars, tuning them, taking them to different areas in the world. So it's better, it's not boring, where I was saying, it can get kind of boring. I think it's still very rinse and repeat. It's still not terribly challenging unless you really crank up the difficulty. I feel like it's still kind of a mobile game in a lot of ways. It kind of has that vibe, but it's still Forza and it's still fun. So, I would say if you like the series and you want to play it on the PC, it's not perfect. I mean, it's not going to be flawless, but it's at least at a state where you're not going to regret your purchase. And also, before I go, just want to, as always, say that if you enjoy the podcast, consider leaving a review on iTunes. I think that would go a long way to getting the podcast noticed. And if you read the book and you enjoy it or you don't enjoy it, leave a review for the book wherever you purchased it. It'd be useful for me to see it and kind of to see, how it resonated with like-minded people. It's always fun. So yeah, so that's the Retro Critical Podcast, episode 12 for October, and I'll be back in November with another episode.